Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Conlin, and welcome to Pop Crime TV's The Outlier podcast. I'm very excited for my guest today. I know you guys are going to love her just as much as I do, Barbara Butcher. And I love her name, and you'll see why. But Barbara started her career as a death investigator in New York City, also known as a medical legal examiner, again, right here in Manhattan. And she made history as the first woman to hold this position long term, staying on for decades because she's just that good at her job. You've seen her on New York Homicide, on Netflix. I mean, you've seen her on the news. She also wrote an incredible book called What the Dead Know. I bragged to everybody that I finished this book in one day. And Barbara has worked some of New York City's darkest cases, from accidental deaths to brutal murders, and also identifying bodies during 9/11. But today, I'm lucky enough to chat with Barbara, and I'm also lucky enough to call her a friend. We're going to talk about her incredible career, her experiences, her book, but also we're going to talk about the victims of the East Harlem rapist. Barbara dedicated an entire chapter in her book to these victims from the 90s. They were victims of this horrific murderer rapist that we'll get into, but the victims were truly forgotten, and Barbara wanted to make sure that they weren't. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to bring in my special guest. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Lauren. So good to see you. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for joining me. I want to quickly clarify this for the viewers and the listeners, because I know I used to be a little confused about this, but can you just explain the difference between the manner of death and the cause of death, and
Sure.
what you did as a death investigator?
Exactly. The cause of death is, there are literally tens of thousands. But let's take gunshot wound. So a forensic pathologist is doing an autopsy on a young man with a gunshot wound to the head. Now, that could be a homicide, a suicide, or an accident. How would he know? Well, he knows the cause of death is gunshot wound, but I am the one responsible, the death investigator or medical legal death investigator. We're the ones responsible to go to the scene. We examine the body there. We examine the scene. We question witnesses. We document the scene with photographs, sketches, and we work independently of the police, but cooperatively, because the body belongs to me and the scene belongs to the police, but they're so integral.
Mm-hmm.
The body in my body is what makes that a death scene, a crime scene, the body that I am responsible for.
You're determining whether it's a homicide or a suicide. You know that the cause of death is the gunshot wound, or police know, everybody knows that, but you're there to determine what happened. Yeah. And so this is something you can't do overnight, I'm assuming, or I guess every case is different, right?
Oh yeah, everything is different. But my job is to gather all the evidence that will provide the forensic pathologist of all the conditions, the context of the death, and then they can do an informed autopsy. So when I get there, we could have a gunshot wound and there's no gun present anywhere in the apartment. So it's probably a homicide. If it was an accident, we'd know about that because the gun would be at the person's feet. Like, when people clean the rifle or clean a gun.
Right.
Right. Or if it was a suicide, we should expect to see the gun in someone's hand, in the victim's hands. If it is entirely possible, though, that a perpetrator could leave their gun after shooting someone. I don't think I've ever seen it happen, because a gun is a valuable thing and it's chock full of evidence. So
such a good point. That's such a good point. You don't often find a murder weapon at the scene, but you're right. Sometimes you do. So before we get into the victims of the East Harlem rapists, because I really do want to go over that case, because that's a case I feel like a lot of people don't know about. It happened in the 90s in New York City, and it's not a case widely spoken about. There haven't been a lot of TV specials on it. So before we get into that, I do want to ask you about 9/11. I mean, Barbara, I cannot imagine what you went through during 9/11. I mean, how do you even prepare for that? How do you even get through all of, I don't,
Yeah. It's probably the most, my job was soul crushing, period. Seeing young people killed, seeing tragic murders, but preventable accidents, and the very sad suicides. So my soul was always getting crushed. And we learned to detach from that by closing down our emotions. But when you have nearly 3,000 people killed in one single blow of horror and danger and shock to an entire world, not just America, the whole world was shocked. This is so overwhelming. How can we possibly process our feelings, shut them down, and do what we have to do for the victims? And what we have to do is recover them and identify them. We know they were murdered. We saw it right on television. So we know the who did it, terrorists, what happened, the plane, where, World Trade Center. We know everything about it except who is the victim. So,
right.
Mind you, of the, 2,499 people, whatever, the number keeps going out of my head because it doesn't matter. It's too many. Let's say the number is too many. Out of all those people, we had probably 23,000 body parts. So many of those people were vaporized, and the rest were in smithereens. There were very few whole or nearly whole bodies because the overwhelming force of this catastrophe. So, the only thing, look, I have major PTSD. Of course, I'm getting great treatment.
Oh my gosh, Barbara, I'm sorry. That's so hard. It's so hard, though.
It comes with the job. I'm a big girl now. I accept it, and I get fantastic treatment from a trauma therapist who's aces.
I would imagine so. You have to.
Yeah, she's changed my life. And so the problem with being that overwhelmed is that it's hard to focus on the work. So it's very detailed. The first few nights I worked the line. The line was where the morgue wagons would come, the ambulances would come with bags and bags of small remains.
What?
We had to distinguish human remains from, the detritus, the concrete, the steel, the chemicals. And sometimes there were more than one person in a bag, or let's say 2 right legs. Obviously, that's 2 different people. Because the cops and firemen down there on the pile, they were just doing their best to grab every human remain they could before the fires consumed everything. So, now, how did we do it? Well, we focused very tightly on the remains. We didn't think about the individual people when you're in the moment, doing your work. We thought about the mission. Get them to their families. That's the mission. And it helped in a way that we were not seeing them in their homes. When I go out to see a murder victim, a homicide victim, I'm in their life. I see their furniture, the little knickknacks they collect, what's on their calendar, Christmas trees, what they loved, and their clothes, everything. And that is partly why the job is so fascinating. You don't just get to see how people die, you get to see how they live. And but it brings you closer to them. When I was in a cave once under Manhattan. There are caves where the people live, the West Side Rail Yard in Uptown near Columbia Presbyterian. And one guy had his cave set up with a little spring shot bed and a yellow comforter and a sagging shelf full of paperbacks. And I thought, oh, how nice, with candlelight and everything. He had a little home.
Yeah.
But I noticed on the rock ledge to my right was a poster, an old French poster for Dubonnet. And it says, Dubo, Dubon, Dubonnet, with a guy with his head tilted back. I had the same poster hanging in my house. So
you felt like you knew him. You were like, yeah, having this moment with someone who is no longer living, but you could do the best that you could to identify what happened and and give the family closure, I'm sure.
Yeah, but just the idea that we both like to read, we both love French vintage posters.
Yeah.
It hits me hard.
Oh.
He's down here living in a cave. I live above ground, but we love the same things. Whew.
Right.
So this gets very deeply personal. And unfortunately, that's what happened with this East Side rapist, Aaron Key.
Yes.
And
Well, I just to close the loop on 9/11 really quick, because I've interviewed Rudy Giuliani about 9/11, and something that he had mentioned to me, and he doesn't get super choked up. He will get choked up about it, but one thing that he said will leave him. This will never leave him, is when he said people were jumping. He said that was, he didn't even know what they were at first. He had no idea what was going on. He saw people jumping. I was curious. There's nothing you can, like, how do you identify someone at that point when, you know what I mean? And you didn't have to do that, right?
Yes, but let me change the narrative on that.
Okay.
It's very important, the word. No one jumped. No one.
Oh.
If a person jumps out of a window, it's suicide, right?
Oh, right. Yes. Okay.
Did any of those people want to die? No. They were
none
clinging,
of them.
trying to get air. They were flames at their back. They did not jump. They were pushed by fire, smoke, and just dying from lack of oxygen. They were pushed out by what happened. Therefore, it is a homicide. And this upsets me a lot. Dr. Hirsch, my mentor, my boss, it upsets me a lot too. And in fact, I went down to the 9/11 museum last week with my therapist because I couldn't face it. For 20 years, I couldn't go there because the pain is too great. And outside this small little room where they had photos of people who had come down from the windows, the sign said, "Those who jumped." Damn it, no. I had a fit. I had an actual fit.
Barbara, I never even thought about this, because you're so right. I'm so glad that you have corrected this narrative, and you should do something about that. I bet they would change it. I bet someone would change something, because you're so right. Oh my gosh, you're so right.
Well, fortunately, I know Alice Greenspan and Jan Ramirez, the director and the curator of the museum, and Alice Greenwald, and Jan Ramirez. And I will be writing this week. I've been composing it so as to make it gentle and persuasive, not angry, because I do feel very angry.
Yeah, you're so right. No one's ever, truly, you're the first person that has really said this and pointed out, guys, there's no suicide here. They were murdered. They had no choice. They were clinging for dear life. I'm so glad that you corrected that course.
I dare anyone to say that with flames licking at their back, unable to breathe, that they could stand there and burn. No, it's not. It's just
right.
Right. So you're pushed, and there is no choice. And this is see, I get angry and I even get choked up, because this is so important to honor the lives of those who were treated. There was no reason for this to happen. It was just evil, pure evil.
I
And
know.
I honor every single one of those people every day and their families. I think about the families.
Yeah.
So,
And when you go there to the museum, it's incredible. It's truly incredible. And you are God, I cannot hold it together there. I don't know why. I still watch 9/11 specials every year and I sob. And my children are like, Mommy, why do you do this? You do it so you can cry? I'm like, no, I don't mean to. I'm just trying to I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, Barbara.
it's
But
good to.
yeah, I'm the
No,
same as you.
of course, I went there and I cried and cried. I
Yeah.
got angry and I cried. And the crying is good because eventually it fades down to a dull ache that you can accept and handle instead of walking around raging and angry all the time. Anger is so much easier than grief.
Yeah.
And so many of the families who never got an identified body, a remnant of a body, 40% of the victims have not been identified and returned to their families. So the families have no way to get any mourning or closure because they can't observe the rites of death, the wake, the burial, the memorials, the ceremonies. There's nothing to bury. How
Right.
could it be? So therefore, it's very hard for them to move on and pass through grief. I'm as pissed as they are. So,
No,
yeah,
I can't imagine. And speaking of victims, this is a good segue for the East Side rapist Aaron Keyes victims, because again, you've done an incredible job of remembering them. And these poor women, they died horrific deaths. And when I listened to your book and I, obviously Googled this case, I couldn't believe what I was reading, Barbara. I truly could not believe that another human would do this to another human. So can you just walk us through that?
sure. And maybe I am just an angry person, but why this case is so important to me is I'm angry about the fact that they were not recognized. Now,
Yeah.
they were all young Hispanic Black women, young, like from 13 to 19, just
Yes.
kids, adolescents. And for a period of probably 10 years, maybe even more,
Mm.
these little girls, to me, they are little girls. They were raped, they were murdered, they were brutalized, and you didn't see it in the newspaper. It kept happening. More rapes, more murders, always the same kind of young girl in the same area. Like, I think it was 103rd Street in the projects.
Yep.
Over and over and over. Now, one woman, white woman, gets killed on Park Avenue, and you can't get enough. The headlines are everywhere.
Yeah.
People in Variety, they do a story on it.
You're
Everybody's
right.
going to do a story. But a little girl who is Black or brown, well, I guess she doesn't get the same respect or recognition of her life. So in particular, this is why I wrote about Johannes Castro. So for 10 years, a man is rampaging through the projects in East Harlem. He rapes, he tortures, he kills. And it goes on and on. And I got into this case because a young girl, a small girl, was found on fire on top of one of the projects, at the stair landing at the very top, at the bulkhead, they call it. In this bare little concrete room, there's just one light bulb with a cage around it. The cage was melted from the fire. When the firemen first showed up, they didn't know it was a body. I thought it was maybe a little trash fire. And so the firemen put her out with an extinguisher, and it was a little girl. And fire does terrible things to a body. It doesn't just destroy it, it disfigures. There's a thing called the pugilistic stance. Sometimes very often, fire victims are found fists clenched, arms clenched, and legs folded up. That's because fire, intense heat, it cooks the muscle, it contracts it, and so everything snaps up. looks like they're fighting. So she was in that particular pose or stance, and her foot had fallen off. Now, let's just say it and leave that there, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I could make out parts of her face. I could still see she had beautiful teeth. White, beautiful teeth. Just chocolate brown eyes. But her body was burned. Some parts were not. There was a grid mark on her back where it wasn't fully burned. It was just lightly burned. Strange grid mark. I didn't know what that was. But one of the strangest things about that fire was that behind her, I know she was in a semi-sitting position, like hunched over, and behind her on the concrete wall was the outline of her body. It was white, and all around it was black soot. So it was almost immediately apparent to me that she was put against the wall, sitting, slumped over, and then lit on fire. Now, I smelled something, the fumes of an accelerant, hydrocarbon. And on one of I think it was on the windowsill, there was a little thing of lighter fluid or something like that. And so I could see where she had been sitting, and the outline was ghostly, absolutely ghostly, and the soot all around her. So as her body burned, she fell forward into a curled up position. So what does that tell us? Well, there's a couple of things we want to know. Was she alive? Well, how do we know that? If a person is alive during a fire, there will be smoke and charcoal granules in their nose, the back of the throat, in the mouth. But yet, how could someone be on fire and sit still against a wall? It's not possible.
Right.
Well, actually, no, it is possible in one sense. I know of 2 suicides where a young man sat on the ground, cross-legged, doused himself, lit himself up, and sat there until he died.
Jeez.
So that requires a level of, hallucinatory, psychopathic ability to detach completely from yourself and not jump up screaming from that pain, right?
Yeah.
So how I opened her mouth, I looked in her nose, and I saw soot. Shit, what does that mean? She was breathing. But yet, how could she do it? Well, I also looked at her back, and I saw what we call vital reaction. When a person is dead, completely dead, and then set on fire, you don't get the same reddening or swelling of tissues that a live body has. Once you're dead, there's no immune response. There's no blood vessels. You're opening up to rush the white blood cells in.
Yeah.
So I did see some burns that were ante-mortem, before death. Okay. But yet, how could she be sitting there? Well, there is one way. If she were unconscious. If she were unconscious, she would be slumped there. She would be set on fire and would die before awakening. Now, how would she become unconscious? Well, that's where we go to the autopsy. And we look at things like the neck. Even with charred tissue, you can go under and see hemorrhage. You can see the hyoid bone, that little fragile wishbone kind of thing that is easily broken by manual strangulation or ligature strangulation. So during autopsy, that's what we see. And we know that she may very well have been breathing. In fact, how else is the soot going to get in there? Now, what did that grid mark on her back mean? Well, we didn't know until police went through all the surveillance cameras in the area and saw a man pushing a cart, one of those red mesh wire carts that you take for grocery shopping. And in that cart, it was jammed up, and then there was like white sheets on top of it. That was Johannes Castro.
Oh my gosh, I was not expecting that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I forgot that little detail. Jeez.
Yeah. So that's why the wire grid marks were on her back. Put into that cart, she had to be unconscious then, right? So she was strangled into unconsciousness, and then go up in the elevator to the top of the building, set her on fire, and off you go. Now,
I have a question, Barbara. Does it means though, like if, I don't know, if she was unconscious, does the fire, is it so startling and shocking, and that might sound dumb, but does it kind of awaken you, or do you think she didn't feel, you don't know? Darn it. I'm just hoping she didn't feel.
No, it's hard to say, but I believe that by the lack of movement, that she was deeply unconscious. She was probably brain dead, to some degree.
Oh, okay.
So that, I don't believe that I pray to God every day that she didn't feel that.
Right.
But it seems like she had to be unconscious in order to be stuffed into a cart.
Exactly.
In order to be slumped against that wall. Now, of course, the defense attorney has all kinds of things to say about that, but we'll leave that for later.
Yeah.
So that case disturbed me so much. And I remember the crime scene needed to do some overall scans of the room. So I went up onto the roof with a couple of the guys, the detectives, and they said, "Hey, Barbara, we're going to go out for a drink after this. We're going to need it. Why don't you come with us?" And I don't drink, so... Yeah. And I don't go to bars. So I thought, God, how am I going to numb this? How am I going to relieve this? And I just went to the corner of the precipice there, and I prayed. I just looked at the sky, and I prayed. Please, God, let her not have suffered. Please, God, take this pain. It was awful. And it was not long after that one of my colleagues, Randy, came in and said, "Hey, Barbara, I was over at a scene just recently today, up at the top of one of the projects on East 103rd or 104th. And the crime scene guy there says, oh, it reminded him of Barbara's case. There was a young woman up there, strangled, sexually assaulted, abused. And he said, oh, that reminds me of a case I did with Barbara just a few weeks ago." He strikes again, right?
Yep.
And then, we have just more evidence. And still nothing happens.
Right.
So, and it wasn't until a perpetrator, Aaron Key, the slayer of little girls,
disgusting,
was arrested. Yeah. Now, he had been questioned in it before, but had used a different name with confusion.
Yeah.
But
and just so people know, he began allegedly, that's documented, 1991, I believe, was his first killing of a 13-year-old girl named Paola Hilera. And then it was, I believe it was, Johannes was next. And then it was Rashida Washington. Yep. But he had also kidnapped a girl who escaped. He brought her to Florida or something like that. And then he was arrested in 1999, I believe. Or no, there was a manhunt in 99 because they found his DNA, right? Or something like that. Yeah.
What happened is Paola Hilera, a little girl with like one of those New Kids on the Block watches or something like that. Some little girl thing, damn it. She's raped, strangled, and she dies alone there on that, over by the East River. And pubic hair was found on her. Now, this is 1991. Did we have much in the way of DNA technology? It was just in its nascence, in its first iterations. So we had pubic hair. That's it. We had swabs, semen, but couldn't get anything. Now, what was it? 8 years later, 9 years? Yeah, 8 years later. Now we have this very promising suspect, Aaron Key. We need to get DNA from him. And he's very uncooperative. He says, no, it's against his religion, all kinds of things. Now while he's under arrest, the police bring him to me to get exemplars. And that is so that we can match DNA now from the pubic hair to him.
Yeah.
So I need to draw blood and I need to get samples 30 hairs by the roots from his pubic area.
No, wait, you had to do that to him?
Had to do that. And from his
I hope you did it really hard. I hope you literally yanked the crap out of those pubes, Barbara. I hope you made him bleed. Sorry to everybody who's offended, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah. But you know what? My heart, my personhood may want one thing, but I'm a professional.
Yeah.
And I can't hurt anyone. No matter how bad.
No, I feel like I could hurt a pedophile rapist. I feel like you might be better than me on that front because no, I'm not inciting violence in any way, disclaimer. But of course, you are a professional, but that is wild. You had to get 30 different hairs from the root in order to get this testing done and then sent it through. And then what?
And there you go. It's a match to all these cases, all these rapes, all these murders. It's a match to Aaron Key. Has to be double confirmed when he's in jail. You know, they managed to get a cup, which he had switched with the guy in the next cell to throw them off. But cops figured it out, right? Because when they tested his cup, nothing on it. It was just nothing. But they're like, wait a second, how can this be? Because he switched from the other guy.
Right.
So
and what's so amazing, I believe, is that they caught him just in time because Angelique Stalling, that's her name. She was saved. He had kidnapped her, taken her to Miami. Who knows what he would have done with her? Literally, who knows? It was, in my opinion, just in the nick of time. So that's a God. Yeah, that's a God thing for sure. You know, saving her. And did you have to testify in this trial? You did have to. Wow. Yeah. And what was your cross like?
Jesus.
Is bad.
Let me tell you an odd thing about Aaron Key. When they brought him to me, you know, of course, handcuffed and, you know, his legs were bound, cuffed to the chair. He was handsome. He was intelligent, nice looking, and extremely polite. I said to him, Mr. Key, I'm going to need to take a sample of your blood and 30 hairs by the roots from your pubic area, and we'll need some hair by the roots from your head as well. Now, you remember the Princess Diana look? Tilting your head down and looking upward at someone? That's what he did. He looked up at me and said, yes, ma'am, whatever you have to do. And he was very cooperative and silent and pleasant. Shit. This is why the little girls went with him. They didn't know. Some of them thought that he liked them, that he wanted to date them. It was so, I mean, not all of them. He just snatched some, but
you saw it. You saw it firsthand. You saw his charm.
His charm.
Yeah. Wow.
Now we're in court, and I'm testifying. And this was very difficult. I had faced this defense attorney before, and he had gutted me. He was one of my first testimonies, and he pissed me off. He did everything he could to diminish me, demean me, batter me. He said things like, oh, it was on a stab wound case. Excuse me. On the Jonathan Levin case. And he said, Miss Butcher, have you ever written a book on stab wounds? No, I haven't. Have you ever written an article on stab wounds? No, I haven't, but I've seen hundreds. Well, wait a minute. You're not even a doctor, are you, Miss Butcher? And he kept at it like that. And I said, no, I'm not a doctor, but, well, ladies and gentlemen, I can't. Are you an expert? Whatever. And he pissed me off. Now, that's a big mistake. It's a big mistake.
Right.
Well, I didn't do great in that case. Nonetheless, the guy was convicted. But in this case, I walk in to give my testimony, and I see that he's the same lawyer. All right. And now I'm not going to let this happen again.
Yeah.
They asked me all kinds of questions. One of his conjectures, I'm going to call it a conjecture, but let's say theory and be polite.
Okay.
Was that somehow little Johannes Castro was so heartbroken over a breakup with him or something like that, that she set herself on fire.
Right. Yeah. Totally makes sense. Wow.
Yeah, but no, she managed to somehow set herself on fire, then get up, put the can of accelerant on the windowsill, come back and sit down, burning all the while. So
and also be unconscious as well. I mean, what? Yeah. Okay.
Right. So there we go. So that's one theory. But what I pointed out to the jury was that I could tell her position, and we showed them the pictures of this ghostly white outline of her body. And I showed them her position and why I thought the way I did. And his on cross-examination, he said, Miss Butcher, are you an expert on fires? I said, no, I am not. Well, isn't it possible that the firemen used high-pressure hoses and washed out that area with the hose, and that's why it looks white? I said, well, first of all, you would have to ask the firemen. Second, and I turned to the jury to say this, of course. Yeah. I don't ask him. I turned to the jury and I say, if you've ever cleaned a stove or like a wood-burning stove or an oven, you know that soot and grease cannot be washed off with water. Even high pressure is very, very difficult. You need a solvent of some kind. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, good point. Then he said to me, Miss Butcher, you mentioned smelling and a hydrocarbon accelerant. Are you an expert on smells? I said, no, but I do pump my own gas. So I know the jury's all nodding with me.
Yeah. And you said that, really? That's awesome.
Yeah. It was so pathetic. But now Aaron Key, I'm looking at him. He's there. He's raging. The guy I saw when I took the exemplars, all polite and, innocent-eyed, no, now he's a raging lunatic. He testifies in his own behalf. He tries to represent himself and say that this is all a vast conspiracy by the medical examiner's office, who were framing him because they stole body parts. We stole body parts. So he was clearly insane. But yet, how did he have this, I hate to call it charm, but damn it, it is.
Mm-hmm. Ted Bundy had it. That's what it is. It's sociopathic charm, 100%.
Yeah.
We know he was convicted. Do you recall how long it took the jury to convict this guy?
I think it was pretty quick. The sentence was a nice sentence. I think it was 3 life terms plus 100 years for the rapes.
Right.
So, but you know what? He actually tried to sell from prison a thing called rape cards. What is a rape card? A rape card is when he gets a piece of cardboard and he writes down how he did the rape, what he said to the girls, and what they said. And he was selling them online for $25. Now, how is this possible? Of course, it was shut down immediately. But rape cards? Where on this earth?
I hate this world. I
know. This is so. See, now, Lauren, you're falling victim to the same thing that we all do. Mm-hmm. All responders, all people who live in a world of crime, we get this syndrome.
Yeah.
And It's us versus civilians. We think that civilians couldn't possibly understand the extent of evil in this world, how overwhelming the evil is. Only we
Yeah.
know. Okay?
Mm.
Here's the problem with that. Once you see homicide and tragedy every single day for 20 years, that becomes the norm to you. Oh, yes, of course. People are killed every day. Lots of people. Oh, everywhere I go, there are people being
Yeah.
killed. Because it's normal for me. But if you check the facts, it's not true. All right?
Right.
Back then, now we're back in when I started out, we were getting 2,400 homicides a year. Now we barely get 400. So early in my career, I was seeing homicides every day, every week, all the time. All
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
And so it became the norm. And therefore, I felt that the world was evil. Here's the truth. The world is not evil. There are very evil people. And I once asked a psychiatrist, a forensic psychiatrist, I said, Doctor, what is it? What could we possibly do for these people, serial killers, to stop? And he said it's all from bad brain. Their brains are just bad. They're no good. They're driven to kill and maim and torture and destroy. It's just a bad brain. Well, how many people have that in the world? A decent number. But overwhelmingly, people are good. Not perfect, but they're good. So I try to remember that every single day.
No, you're right. I think it's just I hear stuff like that, and you encounter so much of this garbage. I'm sorry, and I don't want to offend anybody, but we have a society here that is celebrating murder in cold blood because this man was a CEO of a healthcare company. But it's like you guys are just celebrating it, but are you thinking of any ideas on how to fix our healthcare system? Are you taking any action against that? No, you're just saying that this man was rightfully murdered. And so, yeah, I do take issue with murder cards. People bought these stupid murder cards. It's like, come on. But I
You'd
do.
be shocked what people collect.
Oh,
Shocked.
believe me, I probably wouldn't be, which is sad at this point. But
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Barbara, did you, were you speaking to any of the victims' families of the East Side rapists, and do you ever keep in touch with them? Do they, I don't know how that works, or okay.
No. The reason you've never seen Johannes Castro really covered on any of the many TV shows that have been done around this topic is that her family just wants to be left in peace. They've said they don't want to appear on television. They don't want to be interviewed. They just want to mourn their little daughter. And so you never see anything about it. So no, I did not speak to their family. However, when I was in court testifying, the first question that the prosecutor asked me was, what did you see when you came into that room? And I was trying to describe what happened, the trauma that happened to Johannes Castro. And her family was sitting in the first row. And God, it was tearing my heart out.
Barbara, that's so hard.
How could I say these things? I need to say these things for the sake of the jury, for the sake of justice, for the sake of Johannes Castro. But her mother, her relatives, her family, how could I say this in front of them? I began speaking, and as carefully as I could, I said what I saw. And I believe it was her mother and one other relative, an aunt or a sister, got up and they left the courtroom. And I was glad. I was glad because I can't torment these people any further. I have to do this.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I got to do my job.
Yeah.
So that was pretty awful. That was another crusher.
I feel like I think people, after listening to you, they understand why I finished your book in a day, because not only do you discuss these experiences, but you also discuss it from a a personal perspective on what was going on in your personal life, which, people, we want to hear about that. We like hearing about your work and, everything that had to do with just New York City in the 90s and early 2000s. But again, when you add this personal touch to everything, it's incredible. And so I would encourage everybody to go out and buy your book, What the Dead Know, if you guys don't already have it. It's, again, I can't say enough good things. And I feel like, Barbara, we are going to continue to see you everywhere, and we are going to continue to see you succeed in what you've been able to accomplish thus far. And now, beyond, with obviously you're retired, you're no longer an active death investigator, but you're doing a lot. And I think, again, I'm fascinated by you, and I'm just so honored to call you a friend, truly.
Thank you, Lauren, and I'm honored to be your friend. You've helped me a lot. And
you're so sweet.
If I in the book, when I first wrote it, the first draft, I was just talking about the cases, interesting cases, hard to solve cases.
Yeah.
Just cases. And my editor at Simon & Schuster read it and said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm right here." He said, "No, where are you in the book?" "Oh, you want me to go there?" He said, "Yes, I want to smell it, see it, hear it. I want to feel it. I want to know what you felt. And you better go deep." Oh, shit.
And you did, and you did. That's a good editor.
Because I was crying all the time when I was writing it,
I mean, I really can't imagine. And, like I said, you're such a strong person, but I feel like we need to do this again, and we need to go into a studio. I feel like next time if you don't mind, next time we do this, I'm going to pick out another case that you discussed in your book, or maybe on New York Homicide, or just one that I pick out from the internet, and I'll refresh your memory, and then we can talk about that as well, if you would be up for it.
I would. Listen, the whole point of the book is if I can show anyone in the world how to get through things, how to be resilient, how to overcome depression, alcoholism, addiction, and still triumph in the end despite being soul crushed, then I've done my job. So
yes, I love it. And that is true. That is all included in your book, truly. I mean, it's like I said, it's wonderful because there is an uplifting aspect to the book, as much as people might think there won't be, but there is. It's very uplifting, and again, just you sitting here speaking about this stuff and seeing how emotional that you still get and how it still stays with you, I don't think anybody would be surprised to hear that you have uplifting aspects to your book.
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm resilient.
Yes,
and I wish that for everyone.
You really are. Well, Barbara Butcher, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it so much. Guys, if you want to follow Barbara, I have all of her information, her website, where you can buy her book in the episode notes, and how you can follow her. She's a great follow. So, Barbara, thank you again, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Lauren. It's been a pleasure.